fixed or variable mortgage term. That is actually one of the most important decisions that you're going to make while getting a mortgage. With the Bank of Canada cutting rates, a lot of Canadians right now choosing variable rate. But the way to make this decision might totally surprise you. It's based on math and it's based on your risk tolerance. And just because rates are coming down doesn't necessarily mean variable is always the right choice. I'm going to walk you through how actually make this decision for yourself. Here is something that most people actually do not know. There is a 50-year study from York University. It looked at Canadian mortgage from 1950 to 2000. And it found that most of the time, people who choose variable paid less interest than people who actually choose fixed rate. Roughly 80% of the time, this is true. But that doesn't mean that a variable is automatically right for you. My name is Jenny Tate and I'm a mortgage agent. We are going to discuss which rate is the right rate for you. Because this decision is not really about predicting rates. It is about understanding your own risk tolerance. So let's break it down. Before we argue about fixed versus variable, let's make sure we are talking about the same things. Let's start with fixed rate. So with the fixed rate mortgage, your interest rate is locked for the entire term of the mortgage. In Canada, the term is usually from 1 to 5 years. Most people actually will choose 5-year fixed. If you locked in at 4.5% for 5 years, your rate stays for 4.5%. Your payment stays exactly the same and you're protected if rate goes up. But you are stuck if the rate actually goes down. The pros of the fixed rate is super simple. Your payments is predictable. You know exactly what is coming out every single month. You get a peace of mind and there is zero surprises. You are protected if the interest rate rises, exactly what happened 2 years ago. But the negative aspect of the fixed rate that you usually start with a little bit higher rate than the variable, especially right now. If you break your mortgage early, the penalties can be very high, especially with the top banks. And if the rates fall, you do not get the benefits out of it. You're locked at your higher fixed rate. Now, let's talk about the variable. So with a variable rate mortgage, your interest rate moves with the lender's prime rate, which is tied to the Bank of Canada. Here is a simple example. Say prime rate right now is 4.45%. Your lender offers you prime minus 0.85%. So your starting rate is 3.6%. If the Bank of Canada cuts the rate by 0.25%, prime drops. Therefore, your rate drops to 3.35%. If the Bank of Canada rises the rate by 0.25%, it means that your rate goes up to 3.85%. There is actually two types of a variable mortgage. Yes, two types. One is an adjustable rate mortgage. We call it ARM, when the rate changes and your payment changes with the prime rate. The other is fixed payment variable mortgage. Sometimes it's called VRM. With the fixed payment variable mortgage, your monthly payment actually stays the same, but the mix in between the interest portion and the principal portion gets adjusted when the rate goes up or rate goes down. Here is the risk with the fixed payment variables. If the rate goes up a lot, like happened a few years ago, your whole payment can get eaten up by the interest. You can actually get to the point where you're not really paying down your principal at all, and all you're paying is your interest. It's called negative amortization. Right now, negative amortization, it's 70, 80, and 90 years at times. So you need to understand the product before you actually pick it. Now let's talk about the pros of the variable. You usually start with a little bit lower rate than a fixed. If the rate goes down, you obviously benefit out of it right away. The penalties, actually, that's also a very important point. The penalties to break variable mortgage is usually just 3 months interest rate, and often it's much lower than a fixed rate penalties. So variable gives you that flexibility if you need to break or refinance your mortgage, that we know that happens quite often. Let's talk about the negative aspects of the variable rate. Your payment can go up so much if you have the adjustable payment. If you have the fixed payment variable, as I mentioned before, your amortization can stretch out and you can get close to negative amortization if rates jumps a lot. And more importantly, there is uncertainty. Some people find that super stressful and cannot sleep at night. Now you know the basic difference in between the fixed term mortgage and a variable term mortgage. So fixed is about certainty and variable is about that flexibility and potential savings. Now let's talk about what the data says. Let's talk about the science, about that 50-year study that I mentioned before. So back in 2000, a prof from York University, from Schulich School of Business, if you didn't know, I am alumni of Schulich School of Business, looked at 50 years of Canadian mortgage. He compared what would have happened if you always took a floating or short-term rate versus always taking 5-year fixed. His conclusion was that over that 50 years period, people who used variable or short-term loans paid significantly less interest in the vast majority of the cases. He actually concluded that 80% of the time that's what actually happens. So historically, if you simply choose variable every time, you didn't try to time the market, you usually come out ahead. But there were periods when fixed did better, and we know about those times when short-term rates were very high or spiked very quickly. In those window, locking in decent fixed rate would have actually saved you lots of money. Many of those periods had something actually in common. They had what's called yield curve inversion. So in those inversion periods, variable rates are usually higher than 5-year fixed rates, and 3-year fixed rates are actually lower than the 5-year fixed rate. So in those times when the variable is higher than fixed often looks like a smarter in the hindsight. More recent analysis after the regional study shows extremely similar patterns. From 2000s onward, variable still often not always wins over the long periods of time, but not every window. Variable struggles in the periods like mid to 2000, and again, like we know, in 2022 to 2023, when the short-term rate rose very fast. So the pattern is this. When variable meaningfully lower than fixed and we are more in the normal environment, variable tends to win on average. When short-term rate spikes or variable is actually higher than fixed, those are the times when fixed rate can win. That prof from York University also suggested a simple rule of thumb. If your variable rate is about 0.5% or more lower than the comparable 5-year fixed, historically, variable has tended to come out ahead over the term, even if the rate goes up a little bit. But here is the most important part. The professor later said this is a very clearly. He said, sound mortgage planning should not be based on trying to predict interest rates. It should be based on a client's risk tolerance. In other words, the numbers are only one piece of the puzzle. Your stress levels and your life are the other piece. So now let's talk about you. I want to walk you through 5 questions. These questions will help you to decide if you are on a fixed side person, on a variable side person. Answer them honestly. Even say the answer out loud as you watch this. The wrong choice is not fixed or variable. The wrong choice is the one that does not fit your real situation. Question 1, the budget stress test. If your mortgage payment went up by $300 to $500 per month in the next 1 to 2 years, would that do anything to your budget? If that would crush you, if that means you cannot pay for your grocery or daycares or basic expenses without serious stress, then you're probably a fixed person. You need stability. If you could handle that increase without a panic and you have some savings and your budget has some wiggle room, then variable might actually be an okay for you. There is absolutely no shame in saying, I need a fixed rate mortgage. Actually, most of the Canadians have extremely tight budgets. It's not worth that tiny little bit of extra savings. Stress, ask yourself another question. Ask yourself, how long do I realistically think I will keep this mortgage? Will I stay in this home for a full 5 years? Or is there a decent chance I will move, refi, or change something before my 5-year term is up? Here's why this matters. If you break a 5-year fixed early, especially with a big bank, they often use something that is called IRD, interest rate differential. That penalty can easily be 10, 20, or even more $1,000, depending on the situation. If you break a variable mortgage, the penalty is usually the 3 months interest rate, like I mentioned before, often a few $1,000s instead of tens of thousands of dollars. So if there is any chance you will need to break your mortgage before the term is up, variable gives you that far more flexibility. If you're truly going to set and forget it for a full term, fixed is more attractive. Here is your next question. Ask yourself, what stresses me more? Paying a little bit more now for the safety of the fixed payment, or not knowing exactly what my payment will be in the future? If uncertainty makes you lose sleep, fixed is probably a better fit. If you are okay with a bit of movement and you understand that payments can go up or down, then variable might work for you. If you are in a relationship and buying together, you both need to answer those questions. If one of you is okay with variable and the other is totally stressed out, that stress is absolutely not worth it, not in my opinion. Money stresses is tough on the relationship. Your mortgage should not be a source of the constant anxiety. Here is your next question. Ask yourself, how secure is my income? If you have a very stable job in a stable industry and you feel absolutely confident, or basically as much as you can, your income will continue, it's easier to handle a variable payment. If your income is more volatile, maybe you are self-employed or on commissions, or you just stepped in a new role, then that predictability payment might give you a little bit more peace of mind. So my simple rule is, if your income is unpredictable, you may want your payment to be predictable. Now, take a quick mental score. If you answered were mostly I need stability, my budget is tight, I hate uncertainty, you're probably a fixed rate person. If your answers were mostly I have some room in my budget, I can handle a little bit ups and downs, you're okay with the change and you might need some flexibility, you're probably more on the variable side person. And remember, the worst mistake is actually choosing the option that looks good on those spreadsheets but leaves you anxious every single. My name is Jenny Tate. If you like this video, please subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.